2015. A time when we could buy 35mm Pro 400H. When a Hasselblad Xpan cost me $900 for the body and $400 for the lens. 2015 Jeremy was happy. He went about simply making pictures, out in nature, and music concerts. Everything was great. Until one day, 2015 Jeremy went, oh man, this is an electronic camera. What if one day it dies and I can't repair it? I think I won't hold on to it. Why 2015 Jeremy? Why? Why did you have to sell something that was just fine? Well, no point regretting the past. Instead, let's move to the future. This is the Hasselblad Xpan, a camera that took me a really long time to understand. You see, 2015 Jeremy is not the same person that you're seeing here today. Where I was in my photography back then was completely different to where I am right now. And in a sense, it was actually good for me to let go of that Xpan and explore other things, and then come back to this with a fresh perspective. And so that's what we're going to be chatting about today. This beautiful camera. After first buying it, selling it, exploring many other formats, so many other different cameras and lenses, and after almost a decade later, buying it back again. We're going to go over what really makes it special compared to every other camera out there. And no, it's not just the panoramic aspect ratio. I'm excited. Let's jump right in. All the pictures that you're about to see were developed at home on a rotary processor and scanned with Negative Lab Pro. Now, the Xpan is a really tricky camera to talk about because when it comes to alternate fields of view, anything other than, say, the conventional landscape 3x2 or 4x3, when you begin to significantly change things up, even say the square format, all those changes carry with them implications. Say with 4x5 and 6:7, the formality it brings, which we covered in an earlier video. When you change the base canvas of the picture frame, that fundamental change has other downstream effects in your pictures. And so when you go even further away from the norm, away from the rectangle, say playing with diptychs with a half-frame camera, or in this case, panoramic with this Xpan, it can sometimes feel a bit too much like a novelty. And the analogy of this is like good food, right? If you're eating something every day, you don't want such an overt sense of flavor. Things that are very distinct and unique are sometimes better appreciated sparingly. So when a photographer goes to make an entire body of work on an alternative format, for example, panoramic, it can sometimes feel like a gimmick. So when I first got into the Xpan, it was nice, but something about it didn't really allow me to fully feel at home with it. Because I already had an existing body of work that I was trying to build, and 2015 Jeremy just needed more time to settle down and to grow. And also back then, I never knew any bodies of panoramic work that really deeply inspired me. I mean like Kudelka, like he switched to panoramic later on in his career, but I wasn't really a huge fan of that. So no huge bodies of work, right? Nothing on the level of, say, Exiles or Americans or Ravens. Those are like my favorite books. Nothing on that level really inspired me. Now, I did come across a few panoramic pictures in Minutes to Midnight, one of my favorite photo books, and that did have some panoramic pictures here and there. But besides that, since I sold the Xpan back then, nothing really called me back to panoramic. Until a few years ago, I came across this book. This book, it blew my mind. In this book, Gil Perez uses the panoramic frame in such an amazing way. Not only did he use it as a wide picture, but he used it to connect frames together in the context of a photo book, left and right. And so a seed was planted. You see, last time, the reason why I could never really wrap my head around panoramic pictures was because, well, for a large majority of the time, I was looking at pictures on my phone. And I mean, sometimes you put in a bit more effort and you flip your phone to the side, but still, the screen is so tiny and you can barely appreciate the fullness of the pictures. I mean, yes, I'd also view pictures on full screen on my 15-inch MacBook Pro, but 2015 Jeremy had yet to experience viewing pictures big. And by big, I don't mean massive wall-sized pictures. I mean, who has the resources to, print gigantic pictures all the time? So when I say big, I just mean adequately big. A viewing size that at least enables you to hold it up to your eyes for you to perceive fine details. With 35mm film, you can't even really go that big, right? Because you just start seeing grain. So when I say big, I'm really just referring to a sweet spot where you're able to see fine details, but it's not too big that you're still able to perceive the entirety of the picture as a single picture. So before we go any further, I highly recommend that you watch the coming sections in full screen on a nice display, because I'm about to share with you many sample pictures. Many sample pictures. So let's jump right in. So it's been about 9 years since I let go of my first Xpan, and I've gotten reacquainted with it in a completely different place in my picture making journey. So how has that been? Well, long story short, I absolutely love this camera. Remember in my earlier video in the Machina when I said if a camera genie would appear in my dreams, I'd ask for Machina to come back? Well, no, I've changed my mind. I'll ask for this camera to be made again. Maybe a fully mechanical version of it, maybe one with gears and a film advance. But why? Well, it's not just the pictures that it makes, but it's actually the experience of the Xpan. Firstly, just check out the viewfinder. Just looking through it, it's unlike anything I've ever experienced. And if you love shooting a Leica and if you love rangefinders, this is pretty much that, but much wider. Just looking through it is a beautiful experience, and you might think that this is just a novelty that you would get used to, but no. I've shot many rolls of film through it, and it's still beautiful to look through and to make pictures with. And not only that, check this out. Not only does this camera shoot a panoramic picture, by simply flipping the switch on the back, it goes between that and a regular 35mm mode that allow you to make regular sized pictures. And the most amazing thing about this is you can do that mid-roll. When you flip the switch, the camera automatically repositions the frame inside the camera. So that means whenever a picture calls for it, you're able to go between frame sizes whenever you want. And somehow that's a feature that I forgot about when I sold this camera in 2015. I completely don't remember that this camera does that. Maybe it's because when I was shooting this, I was shooting it alongside my Leica M6. And so when I rediscovered this feature, it just blew my mind all over again. And the reason why this is such an amazing feature is because, practically speaking, you don't always want a panoramic picture because it becomes just too much, right? But this feature allows you to use Xpan as a regular 35mm camera for most things. And honestly, even if this camera didn't have a panoramic mode, it would still be amazing. And in the regular 35mm mode, the camera also changes the frame lines in the viewfinder. So you can see the 3x2 frame, but with a ton of space on either side, which is a huge benefit when it comes to seeing the world around the picture frame, and I just love it. On the lens, you have aperture values that go from f4 to f22, just like a Leica, and the aperture ring clicks super nicely into place, and the focusing ring is really smooth too, nicer than some Leica lenses, I might add. And you also have a depth of field scale. On the top of the camera, you'll see the shutter dial that goes from 8 seconds, which is great for long exposures by the way, down to the fastest setting of 1/1000th of a second, and it has an automatic mode where the camera decides the shutter speeds. You also have exposure compensation on the right, a single shooting mode, continuous shooting, and a self-timer mode. And at the back, you'll see what ISO you're at and the shutter speed that you're using if you're shooting in the automatic mode. So in terms of functionality, this is pretty much the user experience of a Leica M7, but with an automatic frame advance instead of a manual one. So you can think of the Xpan as an M7 on steroids. In terms of the optical qualities of this lens, I've been really loving the pictures that this camera gives, even in 3x2 mode. Now this lens is one made by Fuji, and it does remind me more of Fuji glass as compared to say Hasselblad V-Series Zeiss glass that you'd find on a 500cm. The way that this lens renders, the tones, the shape, the way it handles backlight, everything about it really reminds me of Fuji glass. And it's not bad, it's just different. I've been using this camera in all walks of life, and with a 45mm perspective, while it's not what I'm used to, you guys know I love my 35mm pre-spherical Summilux, it's just been fine, you know, shooting the 45, it feels like what it is, a very slightly wider 50mm lens. I wouldn't quite put this lens in the category of my favorite lenses ever. You guys know me, in this category is the Rolleiflex 2.8f, the Machina 6.7, the Kodak Aerial Ektar, but But this lens in the Xpan, I'd say it's more akin to, say, Mamiya 7 glass. It's really, really good. Let's say the Fuji GF670 as well. So that's the lens, but now how has the panoramic mode been? Well, I really wanted to give this review time so that I don't give you just a preliminary opinion, because it's easy to get caught up in the newness of the panoramic format and just gush over the novelty of it. And I know many people who just love the Xpan for a few months and then they sold it, just like me back in 2015. So it's been over a year now with this camera, and I'm happy to say that I still absolutely love it. Not just the panoramic mode in terms of how much I can cram into the picture, but it's more about what the panoramic field of view allows me to do. You see, every time I see a picture made with panoramic, I feel like I'm transported right back to the moment when I was just standing there looking at a scene in real life. And if you've watched one of my videos before, I talk about this a lot. What makes photography as a medium really special to me is the ability to hold on, to capture, to relive a moment as an experience, more than taking a flashy composition or a picture that gets tons of views or likes on social media. What I'm personally looking for is the ability to communicate an experience. And the panoramic picture really does that in a unique way. It somehow increases the ability for a picture to communicate a view. And it has to do with the way our eyes work, because we see with two eyes, we see a rectangular wide frame, just like panoramic. And it's not just that, but the ability to use it as a regular camera and then switch it over to panoramic when the scene calls for it, that has been a game changer, especially where I am in my photography right now. So 2015 Jeremy, no hard feelings. I understand why you needed to let go of this camera back at that time. Now let's talk about build quality. It's good, but it's not amazing. You know, I'd say it's better built than a Contax G1 or a Contax T2. This camera comes out on top, but it's not quite at the build quality level of, say, a Leica, a Hasselblad 500cm, a Rolleiflex, or a Pentax 6.7. The closest thing that I would say that comes close to this in terms of feel would probably be, again, the Mamiya 7, and it's a bit better than, say, the Fuji GF670, so that's your frame of reference. But so now, the important part of this video is the Xpan for you. Well, I say in my time with this camera, I've only been using the panoramic mode maybe 25% of the time. That's because for most of life's moments, most of the pictures that I make, frankly, it just fits better in 3x2. And as someone who has been making pictures for a while, every new picture that I make isn't really brand new, right? I always have an existing body of work in mind, and I'm sure you'll know what I mean. As you're making newer pictures, you're keeping in mind the existing body of work that you're building upon. So I still do want most of my pictures to be in 3x2. And you know, when you shoot in 3x2, you're drawing from history, from the thousands and millions of photographers who use a similar aspect ratio. You're tapping into that. But when you're always shooting in panoramic, you're going outside the norm. You're tapping into cinema, into Hollywood, into moving pictures, and it's a different thing. So you're inevitably drawing from different cultural references with a panoramic frame. So I'd say that if you're looking for the Xpan to only make panoramic pictures with, you'd probably not get as much use out of this camera as you'd think. In fact, I know many photographers, even personally, who saw the allure of the Xpan. They really thought that this panoramic format would revolutionize their photography. They bought it, shot maybe 5 to 10 rolls with it, and then eventually sold it again because it was collecting dust. So take this as a word of caution. If you're looking at this to be a specific panoramic tool, its use case might be limited. And especially if you think that the panoramic perspective is going to make you stand out, to give you an edge, to distinguish your work from everyone else. If you're thinking that this would make you special, then that sounds like a gimmick, and I'd really struggle to recommend this to you, because eventually the novelty of the panoramic frame, it will wear off. Because the truth is, unless you change something on the inside, the way you see, the way you perceive the world, your timing, your instinct. Unless something inside you changes, don't buy this camera thinking that this camera will change your photography, because you'll probably be disappointed, because all you'll get is the same pictures that you've always gotten, just that now it's slightly wider on either side. But instead, if you're looking for something to supplement your current work, to widen your current toolbox just slightly. If you're looking for an amazing camera to say shoot most of your pictures on 3x2, but with the ability to here and there widen things out. Or maybe you're thinking of keeping this in your shoulder bag, shooting most things with say a Leica, and then when a picture calls for it, you whip this out and you make a panoramic shot. Then yes, absolutely, this is an amazing camera and I don't think it will let you down. If you want to watch more videos like this, subscribe. Jeremy here, and I'll see you in the next video.